Welcome to the Point. This country's current downward spiral certainly speaks to humanity's fallen state. However, it speaks even more directly to the lack of influence that Christians have had in politics and in government affairs. If we're to engage in our country's government, we must do so wisely, and we need to do it effectively. The Christian's role is crucial, and we must understand that we can make a significant impact when a biblical worldview guides our actions. So what is a biblical worldview? A biblical worldview is a perspective on life and reality based on God's heart, God's mind, as is presented to us in the Bible and its teachings. It is by your biblical worldview in which life is understood, it's interpreted, and how you live. It holds that the Bible is ultimate authority, and it's the ultimate source of truth, and that its principles should guide every aspect of life. There are multiple foundational components to a biblical worldview, of which the following are just a few. Number one, the Bible is authoritative and inerrant as God's revealed word and God's will for humanity. That there is one true God who created the universe and is sovereign over all things. Human nature is innately sinful because of Adam's sin, which corrupted human nature and the world. The deity and humanity of Jesus Christ, his death on the cross, and his resurrection are the only basis for salvation, paying the penalty for human sin. All people are responsible for living lives pleasing to God in submission to him, worshiping only him, and obeying his commandments. And lastly, Satan and evil are real, and there's an eternal reality of heaven and hell, and the judgment of all who will give an account to God. So what does the biblical worldview say concerning life? While the previous tenets are not comprehensive, they are foundational to a biblical worldview and provide a basis for many applications on specific life topics. A biblical worldview helps us understand God's heart on specific and explicit issues. The sacredness of human life is a fundamental component of the biblical worldview, which is crucial when aligning with God's heart and God's mind. This truth is essential because God is life, and humans were created in God's image, and as such, humanity carries a sacred dignity. This topic is foundational to every aspect of life. It informs how a Christian understands and defends the issues regarding life, such as abortion and euthanasia, and actually all aspects of human existence between conception and the grave. It also influences one's understanding of the dignity of the vulnerable or the oppressed, the poor, the widows, the orphans, and human responsibility towards them. A biblical worldview on life will inform one's consideration and position on abortion, a volatile subject in our culture. A nation's position on this topic is a fundamental precursor to a nation's blessing or judgment. So in summary, a biblical worldview promotes life by valuing the dignity and sanctity of every human being, advocating for justice and compassion, and working to create a society that reflects God's love and his care for all people from conception to the grave. Another volatile topic in our country currently is that of human sexuality and gender issues. The Bible presents a clear and consistent position on these topics. The Scriptures teach that God created humans as male and female in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, and these two distinct genders reflect God's design and his purpose for humanity. They do not acknowledge or support the concept of gender fluidity or transitioning. The Bible affirms that sexual intimacy is reserved for marriage between one man and one woman, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 2 through 3. Any sexual activity outside of this context, including premarital sex, adultery, and homosexual acts, are considered outside of biblical parameters of God's will and are sinful as per 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 10. Lastly, on this topic, the Bible presents heterosexuality as the normative pattern for human sexuality, with the complementary nature of male and female being essential for marriage and family, as portrayed in Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 through 24. Another topic the Bible clearly speaks to and consistently is that of marriage and family. The Scriptures define marriage as a lifelong covenant between one man and one woman, as depicted in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. It's also spoken of in Matthew chapter 19, verses 4 through 6. It is considered a sacred institution designed by God to provide companionship, intimacy, and a stable environment for raising children, and is the foundation of any society. The Bible also emphasizes the importance of family, with parents being responsible for their children's physical, spiritual, and moral upbringing, as seen throughout the Scriptures, but especially as in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. The biblical worldview also promotes personal freedoms within God's authority, emphasizing the responsible use of that freedom in religious liberty, with limited government, and the priority of love and service to others. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution delineates fundamental truths and practices of personal freedoms, which emerge from a biblical worldview. One of our most cherished freedoms is regarding our worship, or that of freedom of religion. The Bible teaches that we're to submit to governing authorities. However, your faith is to be a matter of individual conscience and conviction before God, not government, as we see in Acts chapter 5, verse 29, where it says, "But Peter and the apostles answered, 'We must obey God rather than men.'" Closely aligned with our first freedom is our freedom of speech. The U.S. Constitution is consistent with the biblical worldview regarding the right to express your ideas and your opinions freely. We read in Acts chapter 4, verse 29, where the early church prayed, "And now, Lord, look upon their threats, and grant to your servants to continue to speak your word with all boldness." The biblical worldview supports the right to express ideas and opinions without fear of government censorship or punishment. The freedom of the press is a part of this same network of God-given liberties. A biblical worldview values the free expression of speech in print, celebrating the good and exposing wrongdoing, as is mentioned in Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 11. The First Amendment, consistent with a biblical worldview, protects the press from government control or censorship, which is fundamental to any free society. There is a definite biblical injunction regarding freedom of assembly. The Bible emphasizes the importance of gathering for worship and fellowship, as seen in Acts chapter 2, verse 42, and also in Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 25. The First Amendment protects the right to assemble peacefully as a church and as a society, which is again a fundamental to a biblical worldview. Last but certainly not least is the right to petition. A biblical worldview recognizes the role of government in maintaining justice and order, as seen in Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. However, the First Amendment allows citizens to petition or appeal to the government to redress grievances. This is modeled for us in the Old Testament when a young Hebrew man named Daniel and his colleagues appealed to their government, and they came pursuing that in Daniel chapter 1, verses 8 through 16. Also, the Apostle Paul appealed to his governing leaders in Acts chapters 25, verses 10 through 12, to redress what he believed to be an injustice toward him. Such appeals are fundamental rights under God for human dignity. These listed inalienable rights are directly or indirectly on the docket in this election cycle. It's one of the reasons we've mentioned them. We need to be alert to an intentional and aggressive assault on these freedoms and on our Constitution. So what does this practically mean to us? While not all our country's forefathers were spiritually born-again followers of Jesus Christ, they founded this nation upon a Judeo-Christian worldview derived from the Bible. I personally believe that's one of the primary reasons for the favor and blessing that our country has enjoyed in its short existence. As Christians, the Bible is to guide us in these upcoming elections and the stewardship of our government. A biblical worldview should lead and motivate us in our actions, our decisions, and in all ways that we would engage in any government activity and political process. As we consider casting our votes for candidates and initiatives, we must ask which most aligns with God's biblical worldview. No candidate's policies or party's platform or initiatives will perfectly reflect a biblical worldview. However, we have a responsibility as God's people before Him and before our fellow citizens to vote for that which most closely aligns with God. This is part of our stewardship before Him. So in summary, and getting to the point, we are responsible for understanding and then living according to God's biblical worldview. This worldview governs us in government activities, in political processes, including our voting. So next time on To the Point, we will talk about how then shall we vote. So until next time, live involved, live engaged, and be responsible and live blessed.